Hello and welcome to Kitchen Table Talks. My name is Toni Austin Allen and I am here with Dr. Roy Austin, author of Definitions for Living, a book dedicated to helping you live more effectively and happily, both personally and in your relationships with others. A number of years ago, Dr. Austin compiled numerous articles which he had written to assist his clients into what is now his book, Definitions for Living, making sense of words and ideas that define our lives. Recently, he and I began sitting at our kitchen table and talking about his book, and we became excited about the possibility of sharing our conversations with others who might benefit from them. The podcast you are about to listen to are the product of the recordings we began making of our conversations. We have discussed the book chapter by chapter and have produced this series of podcasts to accompany the printed version of the book, which is now available as an ebook on various publishing websites. Although we believe you will benefit greatly from the podcasts themselves, you will get the most out of them by purchasing the book, reading each chapter prior to listening to the podcast, and having it available to follow along with our conversations. The ebook is available on Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Scribe, Booktopia, Apple Books, Layman's, and Adlibris. We hope you enjoy our talks at our kitchen table as much as we have, and that your life will be greatly enriched by having shared our conversations with us. We're back with part B of Trust and Faith, and I'd like to begin reading under the subheading. It says, The Trust Building Process. And I'd like to read the first 3 paragraphs in this, and then we'll let you talk about these.
Okay, good.
The trust building process. In our culture, people are often taught that they should just trust others. Rarely are they told how trust is actually built. Obviously, telling a person what to do without telling him how to do it only leads to confusion and frustration. It is hard to do what you do not know how to do, no matter how good your intentions. Boy, isn't that true?
That is so true.
Another factor that makes trust so difficult for some people is that they have been led to believe that it is simple and instant, when in fact trust is neither easy nor quick. Trust building can best be described as a lengthy process that requires not only time and energy, but thought and planning as well. At the outset, you and your partner will need to consider several important questions as you enter this trust-building process. To work your way through these questions and their answers takes time, effort, and patience. But as you do so, you will lay the foundation for a strong and healthy relationship. And so you've given 10 questions, and I noticed that 4 of them can be answered by the person who is wanting to trust somebody. But then the other 6 needs to be answered by the other person. So it just shows you, as you say here in the book, shows you got to work at this together to really make it effective.
Yes, Toni, it really is a two-way street, and it is much more involved. And I'm not going to say complicated, but it's much more of a lengthy and detailed process than most people have ever heard about, and have almost never seen it practiced in real life. And so this is a crucial part of this chapter, is to learn that it is a process. It's lengthy, time-consuming, but it must be done correctly, or it gets all mixed up and dysfunctional when 2 people are trying to trust each other. And as I've said before, trust is proven to be one, if not the most important aspect of any relationship, either business or personal. So this is not to be understated. It's hard to overstate it, how important this is. And you're bringing up the point that it is a two-way street is very, very crucial, because most people will just enter into a relationship or already be in one and they sort of carry on conversations inside their head with themselves about this whole idea of trust, and don't really know to bring the other person into the conversation. But both people have to answer some really important questions that they've never heard of, they've rarely considered, and they don't know how to do it correctly. So this is a step-by-step detailed process of how to do the trust building in a relationship, rather than just saying, I really hope we'll be able to trust each other. Because if you don't know how to do it, you can't do it. So this section of the chapter is just designed to make it much, much easier and much more effective.
You know, I'm really thinking about not only this chapter, but the whole book. You give a lot of how-tos, and you talk about, in fact, the very last sentence of this little subsection, you say, building trust is like building anything else. It needs to follow a logical blueprint, step by step, to produce the best results. And I think about most of us, we might get a new computer or television or a gadget or something, and we'll read all these intricate instructions, and we'll get on YouTube and see how to do this, and we don't do anything like that in a relationship.
Rarely, if ever.
Yeah.
It's true.
And it's the most important thing that we could build.
Yeah, this is your information sheet. It's your instruction manual on how to do it. And very few people have ever read an instruction manual on how to do a relationship well, particularly in these two areas of trust and forgiveness, which we'll get to in the next chapter, as you mentioned.
Yeah. So let's go on down to these trust questions. And I'm just going to read the questions and maybe highlight a couple of things I see in each paragraph and let you fill in.
Okay.
So the first question is, do I want to trust this person? So you always, in this book, you go from the step-by-step process. You don't just kind of throw out, these are what you can do. You say, this is the first question you ask. And this would be from the person who wants to trust, correct?
Yes.
Do I want to trust this person? And in the middle of this paragraph, you say, it is not at all necessary to trust everyone or even to want to do so. Trust is called for only with those whom you wish to have a relationship. And even at that, only for certain purposes. So you gotta, as a truster, the one wanting to trust, you gotta think through that. Is this something I want to go do?
Yeah, here again, one of the myths of life in relationships is that trust is an important thing, that in all relationships, in all situations with all people, and it just is not true. A lot of people waste their time thinking about, I need to trust this person or should trust this person, when in fact there's no real reason to do it. And so as I mentioned in the previous page, these questions are presented in sequential order, so it does begin with this first question, do I want to trust this person, rather than, well, I really should trust this person. Not at all. It just has to do with what the relationship is like, if you want to have a relationship with them at all, and what's the purpose of the trust. And we'll get to that in a bit as well.
Sure. In fact, that's the very next question. Number 2, if I do want to trust this person, what is my purpose? What does that mean?
Well, there's an old saying that I studied in one of my first courses in psychology, and that is to understand human behavior. The first statement that we learn is that all behavior is purposive. Now, I grew up in West Texas, and so I like to use some of the old West Texas terminology and vernacular to sort of make my point, because it's kind of fun for me to do so. I just sort of imagine a couple of old farmers or ranchers leaning on a fence rail and having a conversation, and you can hear one of them say to the other person in the West Texas way of describing the statement, all behavior is purposive. One of them might say, well, now, Zeke, nobody don't never do nothing for no reason at all. Which is really true.
It's like when we were discussing effective skills in communication.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really say things, even though it might be subconscious, we say things with a purpose.
For no reason at all.
Exactly.
So when you're wanting to trust someone, it is important to ask yourself that question, because sometimes wanting to trust someone is not always a good thing, and sometimes it is a good thing. A lot of times you want to trust someone to do something that perhaps is not good for the other person, and it's not really good for you. Mm-hmm. Like you might want to trust someone to do something for you that you really need to do for yourself,
right?
Or to take care of you, or to relieve you from some responsibility that you really need to take upon yourself. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we want to trust people to do stuff that's not really a good thing for us to do at all. And sometimes it's, and hopefully in more cases than not, there is a good reason for it, but you need to identify that, because that's going to enter into your conversations with the other person. If you want to trust them, you need to have a good rationale for it and a good reason for it, rather than just saying, well, I just want to be able to trust you. Mm-hmm. But the other person, if they're a thinking person at all, they're going to say, well, what do you want to trust me to do? And why is this important to our relationship? And you need to have some good answers to that.
Which leads us right into number 3. Does this person want me to trust him or her? And you say, trust is a two-way street in that it takes two willing participants for it to work.
And this is where it begins the conversation between the two people, because sometimes you might want to trust someone to do something, and they don't really have any interest in that at all, or they don't see any need for it or desire for it. And so you may try to set up that trust building process, and you haven't checked with the other person if they want to be a part of that process, because they're going to have to do the behaviors.
Wait a minute, I didn't sign up for that.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
All right, number 4. For what purpose does this person want my trust? And you talk about people who like a con artist, a scammer. We have a lot of that in these days, a lot of those kind of people in these days.
Yeah, now this question begins shifting over to the other person now, that they need to ask the same question from their perspective. This is where the trustee, the one who is earning the trust, needs to ask himself or herself, okay, now let me just check this out. This person wants to trust me to do this, but what is the purpose for this? So this reverses the question and answer process over to the other person.
And it doesn't have, con artist is so extreme, but I can see this, I've actually been in this situation. You might have a job and you feel very trusted, and you're being put more and more work, and then you realize, oh, my boss is just slouching around at home and I'm doing all the work, and it's been disguised as, well, you're so trustworthy and I'm going to get something out of this.
Exactly right. Mm-hmm. And this is a real problem in the business community, because a lot of employers or managers, they say, I really want to be able to trust you to be there and pull your share of the load, and and give it 110%, they say, which is obviously not possible.
Yeah.
But they're trying to emphasize that they want this person to be a really hard worker. And I need to know that you're you're really committed to the company and to this project, that you're on board here, that you're a company person. And that's often not good at all for the employee. And so usually that just is a sign that they're expecting you to be a slave and to do whatever it is they want you to do for the sake of the manager's reputation, for the board of directors' pocketbooks. When in fact they want you to they want to be able to depend on you to be there 24/7 if they call on you, regardless of what your salary is or regardless of how many hours the contract actually calls you to work. And so sometimes they want to trust you to do stuff that's not good for you as an employee because they just want slave labor.
That's right. Yeah, and we're seeing that a lot. Well, we've seen it throughout human history.
Absolutely.
Number 5, in what specific area do I want to trust this person? You say down here, there is in fact no such thing as total trust. And so you're needing to identify what exactly the specifics are here, not just this wide open total trust. I just want to be able to trust you, or I want you to trust me completely.
Yes, and that's one of the big myths. I need to trust you completely and totally and about everything. And that just puts an impossible burden on any relationship. But it is a very popular myth and it needs to be dispelled very quickly. Not only is trust not total in all aspects of the relationship, nor can it be considered to be 100% trustworthiness that's required, but neither is it transferable. I used to tell my clients or ask my clients this in order to illustrate this point. I would, and I mentioned this in the printed text here, just to make a point. And I say, well, for instance, do you trust me? And I've always had all my clients, or most of them, unless they're smarter than most people are, and they have this figured out, they'll say, well, of course I trust you, Dr. Austin. That's no problem. Yeah, you bet. And I say, well, great, because I just have signed up for a course in computer repairing, and I need someone's computer to practice on, and I wonder if I could borrow your computer and play around with it so I could practice my computer repair skills. And of course they laugh and they get the message very quickly and they back off and say, now wait a minute. I trust you as my therapist, but I don't trust you as my computer repairman.
That's right, and that's why we pay people big bucks for like plumbing. I don't trust anybody with my plumbing, so I'm willing to pay those big bucks,
Yeah, exactly. And so in order to make it clear in any relationship, if someone says, I want to trust you, or do you trust me, the next question is, to do what?
Right.
It has to be behaviorally specific. And this is one of the most important principles of all trust building process.
Let's go to number 6. Does this person want to be trusted in this area? Which exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, not only does this person need to ask, do I want this person to trust me at all? Because that has a lot to do with the relationship generally, but in this specific area. And another story I would like to tell is that, I would want my wife to trust me to pick up the laundry at the cleaners or to make a bank deposit if I told her I was going to make a bank deposit. But I did not want her to be able to trust me to do a repair on the roof in our house. I would, number one, I don't know anything about roofing and leaks and how to fix them. But also, I get up there and then slip off and fall and break my neck and kill myself. So I never wanted her to trust me to do major repairs on the roof of our house, because I was not qualified in that area and I had no interest in it whatsoever. I'd rather pay someone else to do it. And so here again, it's that bilateral communication between the trustor and the trustee that has to occur. Someone can want to trust me to do something, but I may not have any interest in that at all. And I need to have the opportunity to talk with them about it and say, no, I want to be trusted in some other areas in this relationship, but not in that particular area. That's of no interest to me whatsoever.
Or, I've been in that situation. People found out I was a pianist, and they'd say, I trust you to play for this musical and direct the ensemble, and we're going to be all up there singing and dancing. It's like, one, at that time, I didn't know that kind of music. I don't know how to direct. I don't know songs, and I'm not a great sight reader. I know what my skills are, and I've been put in that situation, and it makes me very nervous. It gives me a lot of anxiety, so I've had to be very careful to say, I don't trust myself in that situation. So sometimes it's not only that we don't want to, it's that we might not be capable of it.
That's right. And it's okay to say that.
Yeah.
You say, that's not really my strong suit.
Right.
I'm sorry, we can talk about other things that I can do to help you, but that's not one of them. And we need to be honest and upfront with ourselves and the other person. And if they're offended by that, or they feel like that you don't really like them or care about them, then you need to talk about that and say, this is not a test of whether I care about you or that I'm not interested in our relationship. This is just one of the areas where I don't want you to have to depend on me to do that, because that's not something I feel like I'm qualified to do.
Right. Number 7. What must this person do? Here we go. This is important. What must this person do so that I will convince myself that he or she is trustworthy? So this is coming from the viewpoint of the person who wants to trust.
Yes.
But we've got to have a plan. It's got to be concrete.
Yes.
This is an action section.
And this goes back to the trustor, not the trustee. See how these questions build on each other, and they ping pong back and forth between the two people. Not only does the person who's wanted to trust need to figure out what they want this other person to do, but the other person on the other end of the stick needs to say, what am I willing to do?
Right.
And what am I capable of doing? So when I want to trust someone, I need to have done my homework up front. And when they say, I need to be able to depend on you as a friend or a partner, then we need to be able to say, I need to depend on you to do X, Y, or Z. We need to figure out what specific behavior we want to trust them to do, not just generalized.
Boy, that's a loophole. If somebody says, I'm really depending on you to be my friend and support me, and we say, oh, well, of course. We don't know what that means. Does that mean that I have to take over your dog for 3 weeks? Do I need to be taking you back and forth to the hospital every day?
Or lend you $100 if you're running short?
Yes, and then if you can't do that or don't want to, then they say, well, you said that I could depend on you. It's a loophole.
That's right. It's a catch-all term, and then that's where a lot of people get into trouble in the relationship, is that they misinterpret each other's words and they're not specific enough.
Well, let me just read a little bit to just emphasize what you just said. First, a person cannot just be trustworthy in a passive sense. He or she must perform some specific measurable behavior in order to be trusted. Those units you were talking about.
Exactly.
Many people falsely assume that they should be trusted just because they want to be, or just because they are nice or caring, or have been in a relationship a long time. But none of the characteristics related to being a good person, nor the length of the relationship, nor any other factor is relevant when it comes to being trustworthy. All that matters is one's actions. What must this person do is the all-important question.
And then the second part of that question, that I will convince myself that he or she is trustworthy. And that in that particular statement, I point out that when you're trusting someone as the trustor, you have to decide whether to trust someone or not. It's self-convincing. Like you say, well, you must convince me that you're trustworthy. That is not true. I have to convince myself that this person is trustworthy based on their behavior. But as we talked about before, trust can be earned, but it is not necessarily awarded. And so you have to take some personal responsibility. If you're wanting to trust someone, you have to be willing to grant them that trust after they have earned it. So that you don't place too much responsibility on them. Well, yeah, I know that you've done what you've said you were going to do many times for me, but I still have a problem trusting you or trusting anybody at all. And so that's the truster's responsibility to grant the trust that's been earned. We have to convince ourselves, yeah, this person has earned my trust, and I'm going to grant them that trust.
And it begins with faith. Because if that person who's wanting to be trusted is doing all this stuff, but the truster has not even opened up to the faith to let them try.
Yes.
Then there's nothing that the person wanting to be trusted can do.
One of the terms I hear I've used in this chapter is when it gets down to that, then you're dead in the water.
Yeah.
The ship can't move because the wind that moves the sails is the faith that begins the process, and then after the trust has been earned, the trust has to be granted, and it has to be a two-way street there as well, or otherwise the ship doesn't move.
Then it's like you're saying, that the person who wants to be trusted also is really doing a lot of trusting themselves, that other person will open up to them just enough to let them show what they can do.
Mm-hmm. Both people have to be involved in the process, and the truster has to have the willingness to take the risk of giving that person a chance to earn their trust or not earn their trust. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of parents, I've even heard this before, their teenage child says, I really want to get my driver's license. I'm going to be 16 here or 17, and I really want to be able to drive the car. And one of the parents says, well, no, you can't drive the car until I know you're going to do it safely. I've got to be able to trust you not to have a wreck before I'm going to let you drive the car. And you go, okay, now what's wrong with this picture here?
I dealt with that a lot as a piano teacher. I'd have the parents say, well, I'm not buying them a piano until they can show that they are passionate about piano and they're willing to practice on their own. I'm not going to invest in that. I'm going, okay, well, how is this going to work?
Good luck on that. Exactly.
They didn't stay long, I can guarantee you. All right, I believe we're on number 8. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Is this person aware of what he or she must do to earn my trust? So we got to lay this out. It's like instructions.
Yeah, a lot of times people have said, well, they just should know that my trusting them in this area is really important to their relationship. So I don't need to talk to them about it. Now, a lot of this is subconscious stuff that goes on below the level of awareness. But here again, it's one of those myths that says you should be able to read my mind and know what I want to trust you to do without my having to tell you about it. If you really love me, you'll be able to read my mind. There's
a whole lot of that going on.
I know it.
All right. Number 9, is this person willing to do what I ask? And I'm going to go down. When I was reading this, I underlined a part of the end of this and a lot of exclamation points here. Just using someone's choice not to do what you want as grounds to accuse that person of being untrustworthy is totally inappropriate. Let me read that again. Using someone's choice not to do what you want as grounds to accuse that person of being untrustworthy is totally inappropriate. It only creates confusion for anyone who does not know what you are doing, and anger for those who know they are being falsely accused. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yes. Here again, people have the right to choose whether they want to earn your trust in any particular area. And so if you say, well, I really want to be able to trust you to, I'll just pick a silly reference to, anytime I'm coming into town on an airplane, I really want to be able to trust you to pick me up at the airport. Whenever I need you to. I just don't want to have to pay an Uber fare or a taxi fare to get home or to drive my own car out there. Will you be willing to do that for me? Would you promise me that you'll pick me up at the airport when I come in from a flight? And the other person says, no, I really don't want to do that. Well, maybe occasionally I'll be able to do that or willing to do it, but not every time. And so this other person say, well, see, you don't even care about me enough to want to be for me to trust you to do that. You must be untrustworthy because I can't depend on you to do that. So you're not a trustworthy person. Now that's sort of a ludicrous example, but that's carried out in a lot of relationships. If someone says no to me, then obviously they don't want to be trusted, or they're not trustworthy people. So that hurts the relationship because they don't give that person a right to say no without it being misinterpreted as uncooperative.
And it goes back to what you said in almost every chapter. We have a right to say no and to mean it, and to have the other person, if it's a healthier relationship, to accept it.
Exactly. If you don't have I did some training with a well-known therapist many years ago, and she told the group one time. She said, if you do not have the right to say no, your yeses mean absolutely nothing.
Wow. That kind of, that's huge.
Yep. Without the right to say no, yeses mean absolutely nothing. Because it's a form of slavery. Because the slave is a person who does not have the right to say no, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
And so if I expect you to be my slave, then your obedience to me is meaningless as far as building a healthy, happy relationship, because you're doing it under duress. You're not doing it of your own free will. And so it means absolutely nothing. Wow. It's not an expression of love or caring or desire. It's an expression of fear.
Right. Well, you just pretty much described that very well. Thank you. Number 10, the final question. If not, I take it that's you have said, I'm not going to do that.
Yes.
If not, is this person willing to do something else to earn my trust?
Here again, it's not an all or nothing situation. I may not be willing to earn someone's trust like fixing the repair on the roof, but there's a lot of other things that I'd be willing to do. So don't shut down the conversation and say, well, okay, then I guess you just don't want me to trust you. Here again, it's not generalized and it's not transferable. And so the other person may be willing to do a lot of other things. So you keep the conversations going to see what else they might be willing to do to please you or to add some quality to the relationship.
Mm-hmm. So before we move into the actual process, if you could just read a little bit, it says, hopefully this discussion, just read a little bit about how we're going to get into this contract negotiation. I find this idea interesting about creating contracts like this. When you first begin creating, in this case, a trust negotiation, does it feel awkward? Because
yes,
this doesn't happen usually.
No, it's quite awkward at first. Here again, most people want it to be simple, easy, and quick, and it's not. And it is awkward to do it correctly.
And you have to have both people involved. You can't have a negotiation if only one person is reading this, listening to this, thinking I can do this, but the other person has really no desire to work on it with you.
Or they don't know how to do it, or they haven't read the book, they haven't listened to these conversations that we're doing right now. So you have to bring the other person along and not assume that they know all of this stuff ahead of time. So they have to be educated as well and trained in the step-by-step process. And it is awkward right at first because a lot of people are taken aback. What do you mean we need to make an agreement on this, or a so-called contract? And I clarify the word contract here, that's a business term that's not usually used in a personal relationship, but it's just another word for a promise or an agreement between the two people. And it is awkward at first to do it correctly, step by step, because it sounds so stilted and formal, and the other person can see it as a cold business-like process, but it's not. It's a very important process, which adds warmth and strength and intimacy to the relationship if you follow it through and do it correctly. It only makes the relationship better, rather than making it a cold business arrangement.
And it also gets rid of the huge array of assumptions that go on between people, because most of us live in a world of assumptions and hurt feelings because of those assumptions. Whereas you're two different people with two different perspectives, and you go, but that's not what I meant, or that's not what you asked me to do. I didn't hear that, but you should have known that. I could just, the array of assumptions is massive.
Yes.
Now, you do say that usually certainly, well, I'll tell you that in certain most business negotiations that we're talking about, I have made massive mistakes in not sitting down and writing some of this down, and kicked myself over and over and over. And after reading this, after talking about it with you, and knowing the mistakes I've made, I think from now on I'm going to be getting things in writing. But you say in a personal relationship, verbally is the more likely way to do it, with warmth and love and kindness.
Yes. But it is awkward right at first. Just to reiterate the answer to your question, for instance, someone just say, well, I really want us to be able to trust each other in this, and as friends. And if you do it correctly and you say, well, that sounds really good to me, I would like to do that also. What would you like to be able to trust me to do? Which is one of the steps, for the requirements for a good agreement. Here again, it's behaviorally specific. And this other person may be taken aback, says, don't pull that psychology stuff on me. I just want us to be good friends and be able to trust each other. We don't need to go through all this being so specific and all that. So they may feel offended or defensive on it because they don't know what's going on here. So you have to be.
And that's not what love is really all about.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have to be very gentle and patient with people when you introduce the correct method of doing it, because it's going to be a foreign language to most people.
Right.
And so you can't impose it upon them and have a superior attitude. Well, I know how to do this correctly, and you shouldn't be defensive about this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're going to get defensive and confused when you do it correctly because they've never heard it done well. Mm-hmm. Most people have never heard this done well when they're growing up as kids or in other relationships they've had. So it takes a lot of patience, not only with yourself, but with the other person.
Exactly. Well, let's go into the criteria for a good contract. You say number one, a good contract must state a specific behavior. And I'd like to go down to the second paragraph. And you talk about the senses. You say sensory language must form the foundation of the agreement. By this I mean that the speaker must use words which can be registered or understood by the hearer's 5 senses. If people cannot mentally see, hear, feel, taste, or smell what someone is saying, they have to fill in the blanks with their own sensory experiences in an attempt to know what is meant. And I remember early on, as a young adult, you told me, if something's not making sense, it's because you've got to have one of your senses engaged here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if it's not making sense, that truly is the case.
Enough sensory language is not being used.
Can you describe something in this way? How maybe a situation where the senses are not being engaged and maybe a better one where it is, and how this relates to the specific behavior?
Oh, absolutely. It's important for us to understand that at least my knowledge of the English language tells me this, and I don't know about other languages, so I can't speak for other languages, but I suspect that they're similar to the English language, and that is that most words and concepts and phrases in the English language are non-specific. I think I remember some research one time indicating that 70% of the English language is non-specific. It's not, meaning it's not action-based. And there's a whole list of words that I could give to indicate that, like you want someone to be supportive of you. Mm-hmm. By the way, when someone starts talking, you will know the lack of specificity when they use be words, phrases that begin with be. Uh-huh. I need you to be considerate. I need you to be patient. I need you to be supportive. I need you to be more loving and kind. Anything that starts with be is non-specific because it'll end with something that's not measurable. Really, the only thing we can be is alive. That's what we mean by calling ourselves human beings.
Yes.
We be. And when we stop breathing, we no longer be. Our being has ended at that point. So the only thing we can be is alive. Mm-hmm. Everything else is what we do.
So if somebody says, I need you to be more trustworthy so I can trust you, that means absolutely nothing.
And so you have to, then you'd explain that, and by trustworthy in this case, and this is rather simple, well, what I mean by be trustworthy, and that is, I need you to do what you say you will do. Mm-hmm. Now that's measurable, that's specific, as long as you're using do words. And so doing is very important, and you can translate it. You can say, I need you to be supportive of me, and by that I mean. Now that little magical phrase there is a mental transitional paradigm shift inside both people's brains. and by that I mean, and then you state the specific behavior that you can, and I say the five senses, and usually when it's something like this, in a human relationship, the three primary senses, see, feel, and hear, are the more common ones that are used. Taste and smell are not typically used when you're making an agreement. And even that, among those three, seeing is the most common one that we use to measure someone's behavior. Mm-hmm. I need to see that you do it, or see some evidence that you have done it. Like, for instance, if I would tell my wife years ago that I will make the bank deposit today so that we can pay the bills next week, well, I can go to the bank and make the deposit. Of course, this was back in the day when you actually did this.
Right.
But you can do it electronically as well. And then I could bring home the deposit slip and show her the deposit slip with the date and the amount of the deposit. And so she would not see me going to the bank and doing it, but I would have tangible evidence that she could look at and see with her own eyes that I had done it. So that's what I mean by being able to see, feel, or hear when someone has done what they have said they would do. And it has to be measurable by the trustor. The trustee will know whether he or she has done it, but if the trustor does not have the evidence on which to base that person's behavior, then they have to take that other person's word for it, and that reverts us back to faith. You can choose to believe that someone has done something without the evidence, and that's okay to have faith as long as you're willing to take the risk that it may or may not be true.
And in a case, let's just take this example. Let's say someone has been known to either they might have deposited money, but they got money out for something like going to gamble. Mm-hmm. And, the wife says, listen, I can't trust you in this. I need to see that you are putting this in, and I need to see the deposit and anything else. And that would be, learning and earning that trust. And I think in a situation like that is perfectly valid. But I can see the person who has not agreed is going, don't you trust me? Come on.
Yeah.
But this is part of the negotiation.
And that's really where either they're doing it out of ignorance because they don't know how it works, or they're con artists.
Yeah.
And they don't want to have to prove their behavior because they don't want to get caught.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've alluded to this already, but let's do it. Number 2 of the criteria for a good contract is the action must be measurable by the person whose trust is being earned. And that's exactly, with this example is a perfect example.
Yes, and I've alluded to that already, mm-hmm. So we can go on to number 3.
The contract must be time limited. I love that, because how many times have we had somebody say, oh, I'll do that. I'll get around to that. But and then there's that, again, don't you trust me? I said I was going to do it. And, but your perception of getting it done might have a very different time limit than that person's idea of getting it done.
That's right. The classic example is the parent that tells the child, I need you to take out the trash because the trash truck is going to come in the morning. And so the kid's doing his or her homework or watching TV or something, or they're on their phone, and the kid says, you bet, I'll get that done. And so the parent comes back an hour later and says, well, have you taken the trash out? And says, no, not yet. And the parent says, well, can I trust you to do anything? And the kid says, well, I was watching my favorite show, or I was texting my friends. I was going to get around to it. No, you weren't. I can't trust you to do anything. So without that time frame on it, it's a setup. And this is where
it could be a setup on both sides.
Exactly.
Actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So without that time frame on it, there's no accountability on either person's part. And that's the part that's often left out, and someone might feel offended by that. Here again, if they don't know how it works or they don't want to be held accountable, when you say, well, when will you get that done for me? And the other person says, look, I told you I'd do it. Don't you trust me? So you have to add that third step to it. It has to be time oriented, or otherwise there's no accountability on either person's part.
You know, we talked about this very thing in a previous chapter, and I've noticed myself a couple of times now when I've said I would do something and the other person was saying, I really wish you'd do this. And I'll say, you know, and I loved what you said. If you haven't done these kind of negotiations, that other person doesn't know about a time limit. So I have taken it upon myself to say, I will do that by Saturday. And then not only does that make you accountable to the other person, it makes you accountable to yourself.
Exactly. Well said.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Number 4, the contract must include the consequences. And I like what you say in the second paragraph. Consequences are the stuff of what life and relationships are all about. But in most relationships, when you're not dealing with children or teens, I would expect that adults have a problem with this word because they equate consequences with punishment.
Yes, they do. And it's often used either, here again, ignorantly, because you got to give people sometimes the benefit of the doubt that they don't know how this system works, and they don't know how life works really well. So a lot of times people just have attitudes and ideas and perceptions that are just a sign of ignorance and lack of education, and they're not really being irresponsible or taking advantage of
We
you.
just don't know this stuff.
Just don't know this stuff.
Yeah.
But the consequences really are the stuff of what life and relationships are all about. And so you have to include them when you're having an agreement with someone to get something done. And a lot of times people feel offended by that. And they say, well, we shouldn't have to talk about, what's going to happen if I don't do it. What are you trying to do? Lay a guilt trip on me or make me afraid? Or you don't trust me to do that? Or they feel like you should not talk about what's going to happen if I don't do it. They are always interested in what's going to happen if I do it, and that's...
They want that reward and that thank you and appreciation, but
yeah,
they don't want the other side of it.
And that's okay too. It's good to talk about the positive consequences of keeping your word, because that enhances the relationship, and it's a nice topic to talk about. If you'll do this for me, then that'll give us some time to have more time this weekend to spend together and go out to a movie and dinner or something. If you can take over this task and get it done and balance the checkbook for me so I don't have to do it this weekend, that will give us time to go out and have a good time. So it's good to talk about the positive benefits of trustworthiness and of doing things for each other. But you also have to talk about what's going to happen if you give me your word that you'll do something and you don't do it. The other person says, well, I don't want to talk about that. That's not a pleasant conversation for me.
Well, I like what you said here. You say too often it is assumed that both will benefit from just being together. This magic relationship that's supposed to always be good.
Whether we're trustworthy or not.
Right. Whether we've done what we need to do or not. Whether we've said, if you say you're going to take out the trash and you just say, I don't feel like it today, that just is going to start having a setup of difficult challenges in the relationship. There's no magic pill here.
No, that's true. And there's some specified consequences that sometimes have to be talked about, and then there's some natural consequences, and this is the one that you're talking about now. The natural consequence of of not trusting each other, not being able to trust each other, is going to be detrimental to the relationship very quickly and or over time, and you need to take that into account. Look, I expect you to keep your word, and if you don't, that's going to hurt our relationship. And you say, well, that shouldn't be so important. You shouldn't expect me to have to be to be trustworthy. We love each other, and you should love me, and I should love you, and we should get along okay. And we don't have to keep doing the right thing in the relationship. If we really love each other, then our relationship will be really good and happy, whether we do it correctly or not. Now, it's not said in those words, but that's the implication. But a relationship is just like anything else. It has to be nurtured and maintained and done correctly, or it's going to deteriorate and fall apart.
And you talk about if we don't do these kind of negotiations and make them built into the relationship, that there are some unfortunate things that can happen. You say, in our daily relationships, however, consequences must be considered and built into the mutual agreements we make. If not, two unfortunate events may occur. First, there may be a lack of motivation to carry out the agreed upon behaviors simply because we were not clear about what results could be expected. And second, we may be disappointed or angry because we feel deceived by not having been told what was at stake in the deal. Like if you don't talk about it and you're the one that said just didn't get around to it, and the other person said, man, I think I'm done with this relationship, or I can't handle this, and you never talked about it. That person just didn't know. And
you don't tell the other person what's at stake here, or how important this is to you. And it leaves a lot of ambiguity. You're exactly right. And a lot of parents have made and bosses too. You'll tell someone, you need to get this done or you're going to be in big trouble. Well,
what does that mean?
What does that mean? Or you better do this or you'll be sorry, or you'll wish you had.
There's those B's again. Be sorry, as opposed to, or you'll get fired.
Yes, I'm going to dock your pay, for a week. Or for a day, something like that. And a lot of teenagers get very, very angry with their parents because their parents are not specific. And so they'll, a kid may say, I'll be, or the parent says, you need to be home by 11 o'clock tonight because you got a school day tomorrow. And so the kid gets home at 11:30. And the parent just reads them the riot act, says, you're grounded for a month now. Well, that causes a lot of anger and confusion, frustration, and resentment on the part of the child, because the child didn't know that so much was at stake because the parent wasn't specific. And so they didn't watch the clock, and they got home half an hour late, and now they're going to have to pay for it for a month. And so that here again, there's no accountability on either person's part there.
Yeah, and that's how you end this. You say at the very last paragraph of this section, let me emphasize that there will be many times when you and your partner will do things for each other and never discuss consequences. That is certainly your option, but if you exercise it, you need to take responsibility for your choice and not blame the other person when you are not clear about the agreement or are disappointed with the outcome. Again, this is one of those things, these situations I've heard over and over and over in your chapters. If you make the choice not to do this, then you are responsible for that, and you cannot accuse or blame the other person.
That's right. You've got to be willing to eat it.
Yeah.
If you don't do it correctly, then there's going to be typically some pretty bad results from that. And don't hold resentment towards your partner for you're not doing it correctly. But this chapter is just basically designed so that you can do it correctly and not make those mistakes and wind up with some unhappiness on both people's part because you did it sloppily or ignorantly and didn't know what you were doing. So this should solve a lot of people's problems if they take it seriously and practice it over time.
Could you just read this short conclusion for us to end this?
Faith and trust are such vital aspects of all good relationships that you must invest the time and energy necessary to understand and practice these skills. By doing so, your daily interactions with others will be significantly more effective and enjoyable. Now, this is really important. Old habits and beliefs about faith and trust may need to be consistently challenged and corrected at first, but the process will become easier with time. A good relationship is well worth the effort needed to develop it correctly. Here again, I cannot say it more emphatically. You have to be patient with yourself and the other person when you learn how to do anything correctly, but especially with something this important and something that is so fraught with misinformation and ignorance that it takes a long time and hard work to understand it and to practice it step by step, because you won't get good at this for a long time. So it's important enough to make it a priority in the relationship.
This is huge. And I'm glad we took 2 sections of this to discuss it, because this is so helpful from the smallest situations in a relationship to the hardest situations in a relationship. And if we could start practicing with the easier parts of, just who's going to drive the kids to school each day, as opposed to, well, I thought you were going to do it. Just start with something simple like that.
Exactly.
Taking out the trash.
Exactly.
And that way, when we get to the more difficult challenges in life, it's already kind of set up for us.
Exactly. And to reiterate in also conclusion is that I wrote this chapter to help people understand that faith and trust are exactly opposite of each other. They cannot be used synonymously and interchangeably. They're very different parts of the relationship, and they're both very, very important. And the more a person knows the difference between the two of them and when to use each one of them appropriately, it cleans the relationship up very quickly and solves a lot of confusion and hurt feelings. So the main message is, don't mix these two up. Keep them separate and do them correctly.
And I do, again, encourage you, if you're listening but don't have the book, get the book. You can get it online as well. And because at the very end of this chapter, you have a chart that makes all of what we've just said very simple in a synopsis sort of way. And so this is going to be one of those that I know I'm going to want to go back and look at over and over and over.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Again, Dr. Austin's ebook is available on Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Scribe, Booktopia, Apple Books, Layman's, and Adlibris. We look forward to having you join us for our next podcast.